without further ado, I will pass it on to Chris. Take it away.
Thank you. Let me make sure you can see everything. Okay. Does this look okay to you?
It's still loading. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Hi, all. Welcome. So for today, I'm going to be talking about the um, um, estimation of tau, but in a context that is Bayesian, and sort of why why it's important. Some of the current methods that are being used to model tau, not all, but some. And then in sort of part two of the talk, it'll be uh, uh, um, on like newer method um, on like estimate tau that I've been working on. And so I won't show it in its full form, but um, um, in like a brief form. So first, to start here, here are two forest plots, right? So on the left side, um, um, we have some studies that, more or less uh, um, um, from study A through study G, that the center or the true effect is more or less the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's very dense in terms of like where its estimate might be. Um, Now going on the right side to that forest plot, this is wildly different, right? You still have study A through study G, but you have some that are on the far left, on the far right, and I mean, really every way in between. And um, notice that for both of these cases that I created, the pooled estimate that is in red at the bottom is the same, or at least very close to being the same. But it is the variability among the true effects that then produces this pooled effect is what is changing from one data set on the left side um, to that one on the right side. And so this like variability among the true effect sizes, um, I would argue, is not something that is a nuisance. It is something that I would argue needs to be modeled and intended to as much as like the pool domain effect, which of course is for most people uh, like the first parameter or the first result that is looked at. I believe that sort of the estimation and the explanation of the variability among their true effects is equally as important, and if not more important, in some instances. So um, why do it Bayesian, right? So starting on the left side with the blue column, in a viewpoint that is not Bayesian, right? So what is more common in the social sciences, education, and so on. The estimate of tau squared or tau, I'm going to be using tau more here, but you will often see tau squared as well, is viewed as a fixed parameter that we are wanting to estimate. So we will get a point estimate of it, and of which there are at least 15 or so ways that can be done. In this context, for the Bayesian context, we are treating this tau parameter as random. And instead of modeling, or sorry, modeling, estimating a point estimate or just a scalar value for tau, we look at a whole distribution of values of what tau can be. And in this Bayesian framework, we are able, well, not able to actually, we have to essentially make our assumptions about tau and mu and thetas and all of that. Um, like explicit, right? So we are forced to decide what the priors are for the values like tau and mu and so on. Yes, some software will have defaults that are used, but in general, if you take the viewpoint of everything is random and apply priors to all your parameters, then you have to sort of make assumptions and think about what you expect to see and what things should perform like and look like structurally, right? And that is going to be the key when we form the priors for tau, which is coming very soon. So here is the setup. The first level of the model, and we'll be using this model for most of the talk, but not all of the talk. So T sub k is an effect size estimate from a study, the kth study, if you will, and the first level is just the like observed like effect size level. This is, and how it's written here is a fairly standard, as been seen in on most textbooks and a lot of papers. At level 2, the next level is the true effect size, or theta. And so this theta, or each theta, is modeled, and I have it here as a normal distribution. It doesn't technically have to be normal. In fact, there is some work that does treat that as non-normal, but I'm going to treat it as normal with a center of mu and a variance of tau squared. So if we weren't in the Bayesian framework, we would stop here. And in fact, the notation for level 1 and level 2 would work in that context as well. What we are going to do, though, is in the Bayesian context, we are going to put prior distributions on the 2 leftover parameters, mu and tau squared. So there's one prior distribution down here for mu, and then I'm going to, instead of putting it on tau, I'm going to model it on, instead of modeling the prior distribution on a variance, I'm going to model it on tau. It's not mandatory that it's done that way, and there are certain instances when you may want to put it on tau squared, but it is at least more common to model it on tau. I will note that like technically these are hyper priors because they are prior distributions based on a prior distribution. I don't state it here in words, but this is technically a prior distribution because it is a prior on theta, which was first introduced in level 1. So if you say, multiple prior distributions or separate priors from hyper priors, it's more correct to say that there's 2 hyper priors, but in the end, I think that it's a more, how do I phrase it, like fine detail, if you will. Our focus today is going to be on the prior distribution for tau. So I'll be focusing on sort of how to specify this, sort of how it's done currently, and then like one new idea to do it as well. So was that the okay. So why priors matter in the first place? So in this plot on the right, there are like posteriors, and there are 3 of them. And each of the three of them, one is red, one is kind of blue, and one is green. These posteriors each have the same likelihood and data inputted into them, but the prior distribution that is used on tau changes. And so the prior can be a half normal, half Cauchy, or here, like a uniform distribution. And so we see that, like, oftentimes it can be the case that the information about tau itself is not like well identified, right? This is especially the case, or can be the case, if you have a number of studies that is on the smaller end. There's just not a lot of information that is collected, or it's not rich enough to really, like formulate like a true like known prior for it. So here, the half normal and the half Cauchy and the uniform, going sort of top to bottom, they all have approximately the same peak, or in this case, since they all have one mode, they all have approximately the same mode. Maybe it's off by, 0.0 something, but they're mostly similar. But the choice of the prior, and this is the theme that will come up later on as well, it really changes what is occurring in the tails. So by tails, I mean roughly, we'll see if Adobe cooperates with me, it's kind of this area. The center, or the peak, the mode, more or less stays the same, but the shape and the spread varies by the choice of prior here. So, all of this is to say that, the choice of prior can certainly make a difference under not every context, but on certain contexts. And so I, believe this is even more of a sort of reason or example to, think twice about just going with default priors that may be in like JASP or in Stata, right? And to like fully specify everything sort of on your own, as if like you were using Stan or JAGs, because you're forced to think about what you expect to see, what is plausible, if you will. Also, one thing that this prior can also do, this is the like posterior distributions. And so, we would, if these are what we were to settle on, we would then, go to draw inferences about them, looking at the like density itself, maybe like with a histogram overlay, different types of like point estimates of quantiles and center, all of that. But what it also plays a role in is if we want to predict new studies from our model. So here, what I have, and we'll actually kind of see this twice. So we'll see it now and then in a few slides later on. If you're wanting to look at a PI for mu, so I know that we're talking about tau, and I said that we're focused on tau. And so you might be asking, well, wait a minute, now he's talking about the mean. Why is he doing that? So what's of interest in this formula for the prediction interval, or a prediction interval? There are numerous ones. This is more along the lines of the Higgins 2009 version, but there are others as well, is that this tau squared estimate plays a function in that interval. It plays a role in finding the width, or the spread of the interval. Or also, if we wanted to like predict new true effects from our model, our normal zero or not zero, normal mu tau squared, this like tau squared estimate is going to impact what values we can produce that might occur in the future. These sort of new theta values that are derived from our model that we've run. So this tau or tau squared estimate, it both has a role in how you govern like uncertainty, but also if you are going into a route where you want to predict future values, it also plays a role there as well. So one thing I said a few slides ago was that the like identification of tau is usually weak or can be weak. So in this graphic, what I wanted to show you is there are two scenarios for the likelihoods for tau. One is red, it's a solid line, and this is something that was created from, well, it is created from a gamma 3/8 distribution. And this is more of like where you would have weaker information collectively on what tau is. And then the blue dashed line is from a gamma 1870, or not the year 1870, but alpha equals 18 and beta equals 70. And here we see that when this likelihood that's in blue or dashed is given stronger information about tau, we see that the localization of the mass tends to be tighter. And along with that, the expansiveness or the sort of action, quote unquote, if you will, in the tails is very reduced. So, I mean, roughly in this area. But when there's weaker information, maybe there's, just not that many studies, or there aren't, many studies that have large samples within them. In this likelihood option, the center is about the same again. The mode is, roughly the same, but the possible values that can be are much, they're much more spread out, in that we might be pretty confident that this value, whatever this mode is a good estimate if you were wanting a point estimate for tau. Whereas in the red likelihood case, right, there is a lot of area under the curve over here on the right tail. And so there is, it's just more diffuse, and there are like more reasonable values for what tau is or could be versus the blue with the dotted line scenario. Okay, so what priors can we use? So I have listed sort of 5 here, but it's really 5 and change. There are no order of importance or anything. They are just ones that are commonly used. Right. So the first, on the uniform distribution, what this does is, if it's proper, it will put equal prior density over the bounded range of the uniform, which goes from 0 to some finite value of what I'm calling here A. The half normal, this places greater prior mass on like smaller tau values. So there's more weight and more mass. Sorry, not more weight. Weight was not the right word. There's more mass sort of towards the zero range of the support, but not totally equal to zero. The half Cauchy, this comes on this actually, the paper from Andrew Gellman in 2006 that this came out with is, it was, I mean, at the time, meant to sort of update some of these problems of, things being non-informative and so on. And so the Cauchy distribution, this is more of a heavy-tailed prior where there is a lot more mass on larger values of tau. And then the fourth one on the inverse gamma, to be honest, I sort of toyed with the idea of including this and not. On one hand, it's historically common. You will see it in a lot of papers. It will be the default in some software for some parameters, depending on which model you are using and which method. But there are a number of papers and a number of people that have argued that it is essentially not a great choice for a prior for several reasons. So there is currently a push to shift away from the use of that, but I, erred on the side of including it. The fifth one that I'm going to mention here, which is not just one prior, it's sort of a class of priors. These are prior distributions that are empirical and more informative priors. There's a whole set of papers that goes into this. I've listed 3 here, but this is not the full list for sure. And a lot of what these priors do in their methodology is instead of taking some like known parametric form, like a half normal, they will collect information about tau from previous meta-analyses and other places and create a like distribution based on the prior information of tau that they've collected. And then in at least one of them, they like sort of look at that empirical distribution and then find something that is parametric that is like very close to it. So it's not like non-parametric. It is sort of used in a 2-step process. At least in one of these papers it does. So the like posterior is going to be, or can like can be influenced by the prior or priors that are used. We sort of talked about this a little bit earlier on, but it's shown here from a different vantage point. So the posterior is on the y-axis. So these are posterior distributions, or 3 of them are. The red, the blue, and the green. These are posteriors that combine a likelihood function, which is graphed here in gray. I know it's not the easiest to see. I should have bolded it. So there's 4 curves, but they're not 4 posteriors. 1 is a likelihood and 3 are posteriors. And then the posteriors, the red, the blue, and the green, they differ by the prior that was used. And so you can see, almost going from like bottom to up, what the likelihood would be without influence of the prior. And then the posterior distribution, including a prior that is changed systematically. And again, we see, nearly the same mode or a peak is found. I don't know that it's exactly the same, but it's pretty darn close. But it's the peakedness and the behavior in the tails that is where all the action is, right? As we change this prior, fixing what the likelihood was, we are going to change where we put like emphasis and mass on what tau might be or might not be. For the half normal, it's a little bit more sure in that it's more peaked. There's less of tail action going on. Whereas for the other two, there is more action occurring in the right tail. So we would have a harder time making an inference that we are, very certain about a certain value. Now, how tau shapes the true effects. So here, we take the true effect, K, assume they're real, and it follows a normal mu tau squared, just as we have seen before. I'm going to, for this example, fix what the center is, what the mu is. To be 0.5, it could be something else. I just chose 0.5. And tau to be 0.05, 0.15, and 0.35. So that's going increasing. And as tau increases, this true distribution of effects becomes, it goes from, fairly peaked to, sort of like in the middle in terms of peakedness versus a flat prior, quote unquote, to where the last one, the one that has tau equal 0.35, it's not a flat prior. I will be very clear about that, but it's sort of approaching that shape, or it is resembling that shape almost as closely as it is a bell curve with a single mode. So for the PIs, like the prediction intervals, in the non-Bayesian context, keep in mind, I had mentioned that this tau squared estimate, or tau, here it's tau squared, does matter. And in fact, if this were a like fixed effect model, this component will be fixed to 0, and the result then is this, which is just a like multi-type confidence interval. And this occurs because in the fixed effect case, we're assuming that there is a common true effect. Whether that is correct or not is another question entirely, but that is what we are assuming. There is a like Bayesian version of this as well, the BPPI, right? It works in a similar way, but it's nice in that it accounts for uncertainty in both mu and tau at the same time, which was not the case as shown above. So that's kind of nice that you get that. And this, naturally widens the area under the curve, or actually it's a surface, widens as the variability increases, as you might expect. And then third, I don't have the formulas here, but there are some other PIs that are kind of variations of this general PI up here, but they make various adjustments for certain things, like in the cases of a small sample size. So like the Hartung 99, Higgins et al. 2009, and then there's several of these available. I've listed 3, or really 2, and then 1, and then 2 extensions of it. but there are a handful out there. And even some of the packages in R, I know, have at least a few of them embedded already. So everything we've talked about now has been a like known distribution that's parametric. There's usually a concentration towards tau equals 0. Like, tail behavior when tau is much larger than 0 becomes complicated. And they're always fixed to be sort of like, how do I phrase it? Like easier to understand in terms of like how smooth the curve is and everything. Even priors that are like weakly informative, they still retain some like basic structure that is affixed to it. But what if we didn't want to commit to such a like rigid family of priors? It's a fair question. So there are some ways to make priors a bit sort of like flexible. So you can allow for like local deviations from a parametric structure. You can sort of better model activity and mass allocation in tails, or a tail if it's for tau. You can work with a structure that is irregular or has multiple modes and so on. One way that this is commonly completed is instead of placing a prior distribution on tau, the parameter tau, we model tau as a random probability measure itself, and then affix some sort of like non-parametric prior to that. And so I think the best way to think about this is you're putting a distribution over various distributions. Instead of like drawing a point from a distribution, you're drawing a distribution from a set of distributions. Like non-parametric versus here, like semi-parametric, there's a better way to sort of write these out, but in shorthand, if non-parametric, the form of like whatever G is unrestricted. And if it's semi-parametric, then it like partially retains a structure, but can deviate to some degree. So the Poya tree, here is the like new idea. So the idea of a Poya tree, and I'll maybe focus on this a little bit, and then the next few slides are more of the math, so I'll go fast through those maybe just for time's sake. But the Poya tree, it defines the prior on tau through essentially a different like set of like priors that go from the full support of whatever tau is into having it cut into pieces over and over until there is some point to stop at. And this sample space is partitioned into nested intervals. And the mass for the prior is assigned through branching at different levels. And this is where the whole tree level comes in, or where the name trees comes into play, is that you have different levels that you're essentially cutting your support into 2 pieces, and then 4, and then 8, and then so on until you stop. And each time you do that, you're increasing the level of the tree. You do this by starting with a G-naught distribution, which is a centering distribution, as it's called. And this is sort of your, or at least how I like to phrase it, like your best guess of what the prior might be in a parametric form. And then the poetry allows you to start with that and then deviate from it as much or as little as you want to over all of the tree levels. And the alpha vector here, these are sets of values that can help dictate, and they're defined by the user, how much deviation a certain interval is allowed to take from whatever the centering distribution was. So basically, how much do we have to stick to the parametric form versus how much can the estimation on that interval sort of deviate from whatever G-naught gave. So just for the sake of time, and I can I'll make sure these somehow with you, maybe with Carlton. Here in this picture, it's just showing sort of like how the tree is actually formed, or you have the support of tau, and then it's partitioned into two groups, and then the four, and then you keep doing this over and over and over again. Theoretically, you don't stop, or at least the original papers in the 90s did this infinitely, but in practice, you would have some sort of stopping point completed. The math of this are the next few slides, but I'll go over that pretty quickly, or I'll just go through that. Here is an example of three different priors, PT priors, but the alpha level changes. A smaller alpha is on the left, a moderate alpha is on the right, and a larger alpha, a smaller alpha is on the left, a moderate alpha is in the center, and a larger alpha is on the right. And we can see here that as alpha becomes larger, we tend to have estimates of the prior distributions closer to what the centering distribution is, which in this case was a half normal. It's what this black dotted line is. So smaller alpha, you can have more deviation, larger alpha, less deviation, but still are allowed to. Here in this example, I just wanted to show you with actual data. This comes from a data set in the metaphor package that you all maybe have used in the past. 48 effects, hedges G, so forth. And here, with the point estimate of tau being here, it's like I'd have to look back, but it's like 0.31. That's what this line is here. And then these are the posterior distributions for a half normal in black, and then a poetry prior with three different levels of what alpha is. And so here we can sort of see again, this time with actual real data that is published, what this might look like, what it might be used as, and sort of seeing in real time how you can deviate from one, from a fixed G-naught distribution to something that can be quite different in some cases if alpha is large enough. Sorry, small enough. All right, so key takeaways. Right, the assumptions about the variability of true effects and heterogeneity is crucial. I would say in Bayesian context or elsewise. We have, like here in education, a lot of, small to moderately sized K studies the context variability, the types of interventions. They just are, like it's the wild, wild west. Sometimes they just vary quite a lot, or they can. So on the poetry, what this does is it allows you to sort of like have a sweet spot, if you will, of starting with something that is parametric, but then allowing your data, partly your data and partly what you constrain alphas to be, to sort of deviate from that G naught curve or distribution. And then last, I would say, I think that, how do I phrase this? Like non-parametrics, like in this field, is not, there is certainly research out there, but it's sort of in random places at random times, at least from what I can, tell. And that I think that this really could be one area that the field pushes more towards, especially if we're becoming more concerned with like having more informative priors, dealing with like smaller sets of studies. I feel like that's where this, subfield, even though it exists, it's just not used well at all, or at least in any sort of systematic way as of yet. So here are sources that I had used. Sorry for not going over all the math that was there, but, and then, thank you for all attending. If you have any questions or follow-up, I can stay now, but if you have anything as a follow-up, there's my email. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. As someone who's hasn't dabbled too much in the Bayesian world, this is a really, really helpful presentation. I'm excited to dig in more. So we do have about 10 minutes or so for questions and comments. So please feel free to unmute if you want to use the chat. We're pretty casual here, so maybe we can start with Betsy.
Yeah, hey, Chris, this is very interesting. I have two questions for you. One directly about this polyatry. It looks like it creates distributions that are kind of non-standard, right? They aren't smooth, they aren't cumulative in the way that we usually think of. And I'm wondering, if you've applied these yet to any data and seen how, they look really flexible and cool, but a little bit non-standard. So is that going to lead to any sorts of problems that you can see?
Sure. Yeah. So So this plot, sort of towards the end, and I'll reshare my slides, was with actual data. Oops. Here. This comes from this data set. And yeah. Like you're right in that the like shape, or at least compared to what we're used to, I'll say, which is here on the half normal curve, which is in black. You can kind of see it. Yes. I get in terms of like interpreting what might happen from the posterior in this half normal option, that like might be the case, and that it's more common. But with these other three curves, the red, the green, and the blue, I feel like this is sort of like going under the hood and giving more information about maybe what's really going on, and that we might have overlooked by like committing to something like a half normal instead of letting it take on what like we might view as a sort of odd shape. So
Yeah, and I mean it seems like if we're so used to saying, "Oh yeah, it's a normal. So let's just make some sort of confidence interval using the normal posterior." You can't do that with this. So
correct.
you've got to get your intervals in a much more complicated way, it looks like.
Well, and it's also going to be, and it's not really shown here, but like there is some work on the user that can go into this shape, as in like the choice of alphas. Here I have them set so that the left and right child have the same alpha, but those can deviate. Also, the like number of the tree levels. If you go further versus like less further, it can change. So there are more ways to adjust this that aren't shown just on this one graph.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll defer my second question so as to not, monopolize the conversation. Thanks, Chris.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Go
Sure.
for it.
Very, very nice. I like to see the non-parametric Bayes, but I have a question about how you would do it when you have the small k situation that you started the talk by discussing. The small k is particularly problematic. The large k I don't think is that problematic, but with small k, the problem is you can't do, to my understanding, any non-parametric Bayes very well with small, very, very small samples like that. It would be dominated by the G0. Is that correct? And if so, would you deal with it in some of the ways of the other people you talked about who got empirical priors in some way?
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, on that, one aspect that I thought of, but it's not shown here, is like with scenarios that have like a really small k, is that I feel like one way to work with that would be to increase the number of the tree levels so that you are like taking the support and having it cut up into further pieces. Because as you go higher in the tree levels, it gets split from 2 children to 4 to 8, and then 2 raised to the j minus 1. In that way, you're sort of like estimate, or not estimate, you're um, looking at whatever you set to be G naught, because you will have to have that, or at least for this prior, you will have to have some sort of parametric G naught. But by being able to increase the tree level, the number of tree levels, you can cut up that G naught a little bit more and then estimate it in sections. Now, I mean, I don't have a proof that that would better estimate it in a small k scenario. It's just like one thought that I have that I want to work out before this gets sent out anywhere. But yeah. I mean, in the small like really small case scenarios, it's a valid question. I agree.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, if
Thank
nobody
you.
else is going to go,
Yeah,
I'll ask
jump
my
in,
other
Betsy.
question. Is there anything you've learned from working with all of this to that would inform people just doing, say, simulation studies and having to select values of tau squared? I know you've played with a lot of different Bayesian things, and this could be something even much simpler. I see these studies and people seem to pick, oh, I'll pick 0.05 and 0.10, and then somebody else picks 0.75, and I'm thinking, how can that be a tau squared? You know, so are you learning anything just by doing these Bayesian models that helps you understand where the tau squares are really lying.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I feel like for that, I would have to go more, um, um, I phrase it, like on the, uh, 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 like empirical route to see what is actually collected.
Was
I guess where like this part sort of does like fit in though, I think, is that like with the with the PT priors, um, like like you're able to how do I phrase it? Like allow for increased probability for
right.
a non-unified value. So that person that has a really large tau, like I mean, in this prior, like I mean,
You can
if
fit it
he
in
is
there.
done the
Yeah.
right way and the tail is large enough, it could certainly be possible. Um, I mean, like I guess though, it would be more so of like, is there evidence to use that prior that has such the wide tail?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So maybe the more you play with this, the more insight you'll get into what is actually happening out there in real data, and that then might be reasonable parameters for people to use in designing their simulation studies. That'd be a really nice paper to see. What do we know about tau squareds from, a range of yeah, like scrape the Cochrane meta-analyses database and throw some of these models at it and see what we can learn. Uh,
I agree.
a big challenge. Anyway, thanks. Thanks. That's a good, help me think about it a little bit.
Okay, well, I think that is all the time we have. I think another question would push us past the hour. So I just want to give a hearty thank you and just our gratitude to Dr. Thompson for joining the webinar and for presenting such interesting work. I think I'm just gonna be keep thinking about these things. So thank you so much. Rounds of applause are appearing both physically and virtually. Well deserved, of course. Yes, Chris provided his email if you have further questions. I do want to give a few quick plugs. So thank you to those who joined us for the annual meeting of ARA back in April. We had a great time together. If you have not renewed your membership, because I know it slips through, and actually the way the system is set up now, to renew your SIG membership for the Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis SIG is not super intuitive or automatic. So you may have to dig in to renew our SIG membership. We are not in the danger zone of having too few members, but we want to stay ahead of that. So please renew yourself. And if there's colleagues, grad students, other folks that you think should join the SIG, just give them the $5 or the $10 and have them join. And also, I know we just finished ARA, but you know what? Submissions and peer review requests are already happening. I think the call will be coming out shortly. Review requests are already coming out just to register yourself in the system. So please make all of our lives easier, and please sign up to be a reviewer and submit also your great work to the SIG. So I will stop talking and I will let you all get on with the rest of your Friday.